Judge Prescott assumed that imposing a fine would silence Pam Bondi, but what unfolded next completely dismantled his argument in ways he never expected. The Tampa courthouse had seen its fair share of intense legal battles, from high-profile lawsuits to heated criminal cases. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared those inside for the storm that was about to erupt that morning. Pam Bondi, always sharp and prepared, stepped through the courthouse's imposing wooden doors, her presence commanding attention. In one hand, she carried a sleek black briefcase, the other hand adjusting the lapel of her blazer with precision. This was supposed to be a routine hearing, quick, simple, and uneventful. But as she approached the defendant's table, she caught the piercing gaze of Judge Prescott. It wasn't directed at her face.
No.
His eyes were locked on something just below her collarbone. A small, simple gold cross resting against her skin. A hushed tension settled over the room, a sudden shift in energy that everyone felt but no one dared to acknowledge. Then, in a voice as cold and precise as a gavel striking the bench, Prescott cleared his throat. "Miss Bondi," he began, his tone laced with authority, "I must remind you, religious symbols are not permitted in my courtroom."
Pam didn't flinch.
Not even for a second. "Your Honor," she responded evenly, her voice unwavering, "this cross is no different than a wedding ring or a locket containing a family photo." Prescott's expression remained unreadable, but there was an unmistakable flicker of irritation in his eyes. "Remove it, or you will face a fine," he stated firmly. A ripple of murmurs spread through the courtroom. The clerk stole a nervous glance between Pam and the judge. This was unprecedented. Judges had imposed their authority in unusual ways before, but never had an attorney been fined over a piece of jewelry. Pam stood firm. "With all due respect, Your Honor, I will not remove my cross." Prescott's jaw tightened. "Then I will issue a fine for disregarding the courtroom's neutrality," he snapped, his patience clearly waning. Calmly, deliberately, Pam folded her hands over her briefcase and met the judge's gaze. "Before we proceed, I would like to formally address this issue." Prescott arched an eyebrow. "Address it? Miss Bondi, this hearing is about a business dispute, not your personal grievances." Pam's eyes sharpened. "I am well aware of the case at hand, Your Honor," she replied. "But I also know that the First Amendment doesn't take a recess for personal opinions." A heavy silence gripped the room. This was no longer about courtroom decorum, this was a direct challenge to judicial authority. "You are fining me for wearing a cross," Pam continued, her voice measured. "Let's break that down legally, shall we?" Prescott exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples, but Pam was already pulling out a document from her briefcase, every movement deliberate and precise. "What legal precedent are you basing this fine on, Your Honor?" she asked, her tone both respectful and unyielding. The room was deathly still. Prescott's voice was taut. "This courtroom operates under my authority." Pam's response was swift. "And that authority does not override the Constitution," she countered. "Under the First Amendment, personal religious expression is protected, especially when it does not disrupt proceedings." She wasn't done. Not even close. Holding up the document, she read aloud. "Tinker v. Des Moines, 1969. She glanced at the judge. That ruling affirmed that individuals retain their constitutional rights even in government institutions. She turned another page. West Virginia State Board of Education v. Barnett, 1943. Her gaze didn't waver. That case ruled that forcing someone to remove symbols of personal belief is a violation of the First Amendment. The weight of her words hung in the air. "Would you like me to continue, Your Honor?" she asked, her voice steady. Prescott's jaw clenched. The tension in the courtroom was suffocating. "This isn't a religious debate, Miss Bondi," he said, his voice strained. Pam's lips curved into a knowing smile. But it wasn't a smile of amusement. It was the kind of smile that signaled the tide was turning. "Then why did you make it one?" A collective gasp rippled through the room. Prescott's grip on authority was slipping, and everyone could see it. "With all due respect, Your Honor," Pam pressed on, "I will stop when I receive a legal justification for this fine." She tilted her head slightly. So far, I haven't heard one. The silence stretched unbearably long. Then, at last, Prescott exhaled. Mark the fine as pending review, he muttered to the clerk. Pam didn't move. I'll take that as a temporary victory, she said coolly. But we both know this isn't just about a fine anymore. Prescott's expression darkened, but Pam had already shifted gears. She wasn't here just to win a personal battle. She was here to set a precedent. Rules exist for a reason, Miss Bondi. Prescott tried again, grasping at what little ground he had left. If I allow one form of personal expression, I open the door to all of them. Pam nodded. Like wedding bands? Or the lapel pins worn by government officials? She leaned forward slightly. Or, how about the time you allowed a defense attorney to wear a pink ribbon for breast cancer awareness during a trial? The courtroom erupted in hushed disbelief. Why does this rule apply only to my cross, Your Honor? Pam asked, her voice steady. Prescott had no answer. No defense. No escape. And then Pam delivered the final blow. If you uphold this fine, Your Honor, I will file an appeal before the ink on your ruling even dries. She let the words settle. This case will make headlines, she added, knowing full well that once it hit the public, Prescott's authority would be forever scrutinized. The judge's pride was wounded, and he knew it. The fine is rescinded, Prescott finally muttered, barely audible. Pam smiled. Much appreciated, Your Honor. But she knew this was far from over. As she exited the courthouse, the storm outside was nothing compared to the media frenzy already brewing. Florida judge attempts to fine attorney for wearing a cross, but it backfires spectacularly. Pam wasn't concerned about the headlines. This wasn't just about one moment. This was about a dangerous precedent that needed to be stopped. The Florida Bar Association released a statement the next morning. It was vague, but the message was clear. Judges have the right to maintain decorum, but attorneys are afforded personal expression. Pam knew what this was. Prescott was trying to shift the narrative, to paint her as the troublemaker, the one who had disrupted the courtroom for personal defiance. But she wasn't about to let that happen. She picked up her phone and dialed Lisa Reynolds, a journalist known for exposing judicial overreach. Within hours, the story had exploded. Legal experts tore Prescott's argument apart. Constitutional scholars weighed in. And the Florida Judicial Review Board announced it would examine his actions. Prescott's reputation? Tarnished. His authority? Shaken. Pam had won. Not just for herself, but for every attorney, every citizen who believed in standing up for their rights. And this was just the beginning. If you believe in standing up for personal rights and fighting for freedom, share this story and subscribe for more powerful, eye-opening stories like this.